What gift wraps have you received, or what failures wrapped in learnings, or learnings wrapped in failure have you received, and how do you unwrap it?
Hmm. Yeah, it's about honesty with yourself and being able to do to effectively self-reflect. And so this doesn't seem like a big problem, but one problem that I always had was whenever I would take personality profiles or personality tests, I would say, I'm that's not me. But then, and that was a problem. And so I looked at that. I said, well, what's wrong here? Well, then I came to understand recently when I retook the Enneagram profile test that I respond to a lot of things as not who I am, but who I aspire to be.
Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
The fatal flaw of those assessments is we think about the person that we want to be or what the ideal state is, or we're so conditioned by what we're doing in our current role that we answer that not as in our natural state, but maybe what we've been doing
Hmm.
day after day in our role or in our career.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my point is that in order to be able to unwrap that gift, it's all about really being honest with yourself in terms of self-reflection, because that's really the source of where you find all the learnings that you can get from failure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's, I'll take the bait, Dan. I
Great.
think also, since we were talking beforehand about this, because it's very applicable, we were talking about golden handcuffs, and for all of the people out there right now who are in companies that are really big and paying them really well, but you're miserable, this story is for you, because at a younger age, I was at a top company, and I wasn't being honest with myself, James. My inner voice was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You hate your job. But by all standards, as the culture was telling me, like, I had it, I had done it, I hit the pinnacle at a young age. And I was like, every signal was like, this is not healthy, nor do I like it. And one day I finally came home and said out loud to myself, I shocked myself. I was like, this is not working. And the lesson there, right? And I quickly unraveled myself from the situation, and I was really honest, with my boss, whom I loved so much. There were so many reasons. I hear people say, I'm staying around for the people. I just want to say to everybody, that's not enough. You can have the people, you can have the job, and you can have the salary, and you want all three.
Yep.
And the learning for me was to not wait so long, but I was young and I was in such a position of, power and respect and admiration that it was just hard. And I was like, at the end of the day, it was ego. I was like, what am I holding on to? And it felt like a thin layer, thin shell, really, and it was just ego. It was the only word I could come up with. And it was such a good thing to learn early, because I was like, I will never do that again. And your body's not lying to you. If you are constantly miserable and you are constantly, your inner voice is talking to you, being like, what are you doing? Listen to it, because if you don't, it will show up eventually in some explosive way. And I'm kind of seeing that across the board right now with people quitting or holding on tightly to their jobs, right? Even though they're like, but the money, I'm like, the money will come in another form. And so, those are some pretty important lessons.
Yeah.
I am very inspired by both of you, James and Kate, and it's great to be hearing these stories, because they're also jogging my own thoughts and my memories from things from earlier in my career. And a particularly painful one just came up that I'm happy to share. So I mentioned that I worked beforehand in strategic partnerships. I was at a research center, and at that research center, I was in charge of, or I was one of two people raising the money. And that was an immense amount of responsibility to realize that the salaries of the researchers and the editors and the marketing and the government relations and everyone relied on my success in my work. And they were also really entrusting in me, someone who had no experience in this and was learning very, very quickly on the spot, that I was gonna get it right and we were gonna hit our targets. And I don't remember if it was my second or my third year, but I started getting a little overconfident and found myself in the third quarter of the fiscal year realizing that we were not going to hit our targets, that some projections that I had made and confidently told the people around me, I'll close it, it'll be fine, were not happening. And it was a terrible feeling. It was an absolutely terrible feeling. And I remember sitting with my boss, who was incredibly supportive and wonderful and an amazing mentor, and her saying to me, I can see how much you care about what we do. And just getting that encouragement in that moment was so important. And then her follow-up challenge, which was, and I need you to be able to do a bit more separating between your worth as a human being and the bottom line at the end of this fiscal year. And how important that moment, I don't think I've ever told that story before in this kind of a context. And I think that for in the context of wrapping gifts in, I don't remember what the
something failure.
I don't know, something not good. That I don't remember what the word was, but it's a curse word in my mind at the moment. Was that I really the big gift that I got from that big failure of being able to, we survived, right? We survived the year, but it wasn't the most pleasant experience that I had ever gone through. Was twofold. First of all, I tried. Like, I was being brave. I put myself out there. I set ambitious goals. And in those particular instances, it didn't hit them. And we all survived it. It was totally fine at the end of the day. So one is keep trying, because, and this is what one of the things with the clients who I work with who are experiencing new leadership is that the only way to be brave is to risk every now and then things not working out as you planned. And the second is that if you know that there are good people around you, to give them that benefit of the doubt that they care and that they're trying and that people deserve more than one chance. And if it comes from a place of true intent that, I'm going to learn from this and I will continue improving, to give those people the opportunity, because I stayed for another few years after that and we hit our targets.
The thing that I as you're telling that story, when, and this is also, from a positive mindset and a growth mindset from, the Carol Dweck perspective, there's so much psychology involved in how people can overcome failure based on their belief that it's possible. That one of my favorite stories is the story of Roger Bannister. Do you guys know who Roger Bannister is? Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Share for the audience, because I'm sure there's somebody who will be listening to that.
So Roger Bannister was a miler, and at the time, no one had broke the 4-minute mile, and doctors said it's physically impossible. Men's lungs will burst if they attempt it, and it just was tried and trying. It just couldn't get it. People were dissuaded against it. And then Roger Bannister said, I am going to do this, and he did it, and he finally made it happen. And it took years and years and years for someone to break the 4-minute mile. As soon as Roger Bannister did it, every year, multiple people were able to break the 4-minute mile. And there was no training or any. It was all psychological. It was just like, holy crap! Yeah, this can be done. And when we are able to overcome our problems and address failure and address the things that we are afraid of and show courage. It's either fear of loss or fear of the process or fear of the outcome. When we can identify those fears and overcome them, that's when we can really make those huge strides and accomplish the thing we are capable accomplish.
Yeah. I feel like we invited Brene Brown to this conversation because we're talking a lot about standing in the arena and, being there and being there on the ground floor in the arena is a very different experience. And there's a lot of vulnerability with that, but also a lot of strength and respect and thank you all again for joining us for this conversation, because this is an arena. You're in it. You're talking about things. You're being vulnerable. You're talking about failure. So,